strange car in the driveway was a black Lexus SUV with a dealer plate frame from somewhere in Connecticut. I noticed it before I noticed anything else, because I had driven 6 hours to get to this lake, and I knew every single vehicle that should have been parked at this house, and that wasn't one of them. I sat in my Subaru with the engine still running and the AC blowing cold air across my hands, which were not cold. They were warm and a little sweaty because I had just spent the last 45 minutes on the back roads up from the highway, and I always get tense on those last 45 minutes. The road bends past 3 lakes that aren't this one, and every time I pass them, I think about the day I closed on the land. The day I signed the contractor's final invoice. The day my dad first stepped onto the dock and didn't say anything for almost a full minute. Just stood there with his hands in his pockets like he was afraid the wind would take him. The cottage was supposed to be empty until Saturday. It was Thursday afternoon. My parents were still on the cruise I had booked for them. The one I told them was a small bonus gift before the big reveal. They wouldn't be back until Sunday morning. The whole point was that I had 3 days to put fresh sheets on the bed, fill the fridge, walk through the punch list one more time, and tie a stupid red ribbon on the front porch railing, the way my mom used to do for our birthdays. So whose Lexus? I turned off the engine and sat in the silence for another minute. The lake was doing that thing it does in late afternoon, where the water gets so still it looks like a sheet of green glass, and the dragonflies skim across it without breaking the surface. My sister's voice came back to me, the one she'd used at Thanksgiving when I told her about the cottage. "Oh, that's so sweet, Hannah. Like I'd made our parents a macaroni necklace." I should explain. My name is Hannah. I'm 31 years old. I'm a partner-track senior associate at a commercial real estate firm in Boston, which is a long way of saying I read property contracts for a living, and I have read a lot of them. My older sister is named Margaret, but everyone has called her Maggie since she was 3 years old, and that's what she still goes by, even though she signs her emails Margaret M. Penhallow now, with the M for Maeve, which she added in her 30s because she said it sounded more elegant. Maggie is 36. She works in interior design, sort of, which means she has a website with 3 projects on it and a husband who pays the bills. The husband's name is Brett Penhallow. I want you to remember that name because you're going to hear it more than you want to. My parents have been married for 40 years this June. My dad is 66 and recently retired from a career as a high school history teacher, the kind who coached the JV soccer team for 28 seasons and went to every single one of his students' graduations even after they weren't his students anymore. My mom is 64 and was a school nurse, which meant she patched up my knees and Maggie's knees and approximately every knee in our small Pennsylvania town for 30 years. Neither of them ever made more than $58,000 in a year. They put 2 kids through college. They paid off their house when I was in high school by putting every tax refund into the principal. They drove the same Honda Odyssey from when I was 9 until I was 26. I bought the lake property 2 years ago. I had been saving for almost a decade, since my second year out of law school, with a specific picture in my head, my parents on a porch, with coffee, watching the water. That was it. That was the whole picture. I bought a wooded 3-acre parcel on a quiet lake in northern Vermont, far enough from the main highway that you can hear the loons at night, but close enough to a town that my mom could get to a grocery store in 15 minutes. I worked with a builder out of Burlington who was patient with me through 18 months of decisions, every single one of which I made myself with my own money on my own credit. The total was $310,000. Land, build, dock, septic, well, furnishings, everything. I have the spreadsheet. I have the wires. I have the receipts. I have a folder, actually, a real physical folder in a real physical filing cabinet in my apartment because I'm the kind of person who keeps physical folders, and that habit was about to save my parents' future. Although I didn't know that yet, sitting in the driveway looking at a Lexus that should not have been there, I got out of the car. I left my overnight bag in the trunk. I walked up the gravel path, and as I got closer, I could hear voices coming from inside, and I could hear something else too, which was the unmistakable sound of furniture being dragged across hardwood floor. The front door was unlocked. I'm going to tell you exactly what I saw when I opened it, because I have replayed this moment so many times that I can describe the lighting in the room. My sister Maggie was in the great room, kneeling on the floor next to the coffee table, putting some kind of decorative bowl into a cardboard box. Her husband Brett was at the back of the room near the sliding glass doors, standing on a stepladder, taking down the curtains. The curtains I had picked out, in a soft cream linen, because my mom once said in passing that she liked the way light came through linen. Brett had them halfway off the rod. There was already a pile of them on the floor. There was a third person there, a woman in her 40s in a gray blazer, with a clipboard and a tape measure, and one of those little laser distance things contractors use. She was the one who had come in the Lexus. I knew that the second I saw her because she had the look of someone who had driven 6 hours from Connecticut to take measurements. Maggie saw me first. She stood up so fast she almost knocked over the box. "Hannah, you're not supposed to be here until Saturday." That was what she said. Not hello, not what a surprise. Just an accusation that I was in the wrong place, as if I had broken into her house. "Maggie." My voice came out level. "I work in negotiation. I have trained for 10 years to keep my voice level when something inside me wants to scream. What are you doing?" Brett stepped down off the ladder. Brett is the kind of man who has been told he's charming his entire life and has come to believe it without ever actually being charming. He's 6'1" with the soft face of someone who has never done a hard day's work, and he was wearing a polo shirt with a small embroidered logo from a country club he doesn't actually belong to, but visits as a guest of his father-in-law who isn't my father, because Brett's father-in-law is also somehow my father, but Brett doesn't seem to think of it that way. "Hannah, hey!" He crossed the room and tried to put a hand on my shoulder. I stepped back. "Look, this is great timing, actually. We were going to call you. Maggie and I have been thinking, and where are my parents?" "They're still on the cruise," Maggie said quickly. "Mom called me yesterday. They're having a great time. Why are you taking down their curtains?" The woman with the clipboard cleared her throat. "I think I should give you all some space." "No," I said. "Stay. Who are you?" She looked at Brett. Brett looked at Maggie. Maggie looked at the floor. "I'm with Northeast Vacation Rentals," the woman said carefully. "Mr. Miss Vacation Rentals," the woman said carefully. "Penhallow contacted us about a property assessment for short-term rental listing." I took a long breath through my nose. I could feel my pulse in my fingertips. The lake outside the sliding glass doors was still doing its glass sheet thing. A boat went past in the distance. I could see, very faintly, the curve of the dock I had walked on with my dad 3 weeks ago when I'd brought him up here for a sneak preview. Just him and me. He had cried in the car on the way back. He had cried for almost a full 40 miles. He had said, "Hannah, you didn't have to do this." And I had said, "Dad, I wanted to." "Brett," I said, "step outside with me, please." "Hannah, now." We stood on the front porch. My sister followed us out, of course, because Maggie has never let Brett handle a situation alone in 12 years of marriage. The porch faces the gravel drive and the woods, not the lake. I had wanted it that way on purpose. The porch was for arrivals and goodbyes. The deck out back was for the lake. I had thought about every inch of this house. Let me get this straight. I kept my voice down because the rental agent was still inside, and I didn't want her to hear. "You drove up here while Mom and Dad are on the cruise I paid for, and you're trying to list this house as a vacation rental. It's a family asset, Hannah." Brett said it like he was correcting a child. "We're just trying to make it work for everyone. It's not a family asset. It's in your parents' name, isn't it?" He smiled at me. He actually smiled. "Last time I checked, Mom and Dad's stuff is family stuff. It's a gift from me to them, right? But legally..." "Don't say legally to me, Brett." He didn't seem to register the warning. Maggie did. Maggie has known me for 31 years, and she has only seen me use that voice maybe 4 times, and one of them was with our cousin Vincent at the funeral when he tried to take Grandma's wedding ring out of her purse. Maggie put a hand on Brett's arm. Brett ignored it. "Hannah, look, we've talked it over. Your parents are getting older. They're not going to be able to maintain a place like this much longer. Maggie and I think the smart move is to put it on the rental market now. Generate some income, and when the time comes, we use that income to help them with assisted living. It's actually a really thoughtful plan. We were going to surprise you with it." "Surprise me?" "Yeah, by taking down the curtains I picked out and putting them in a box. The curtains are going to work for a vacation rental. We need something more, neutral." "They are neutral. They are neutral. They're literally cream." Maggie stepped in. "Hannah, can we just sit down and talk about this like adults? You're being really dramatic right now." I looked at my sister, my older sister, the girl who had taught me to ride a bike on the cul-de-sac in front of our house in 1998 and then ridden ahead of me all the way down the hill while I screamed for her to wait. Maggie has always been 5 years and 10 lifetimes ahead of me. She has always been the one who decided what we were doing. She decided we were sharing a room when we were little. She decided we weren't sharing a room when she turned 12. She decided I would be a bridesmaid in her wedding. She decided I wouldn't be the maid of honor. She decided which one of us would call Mom on Mother's Day, and the answer was always me. Maggie sent flowers from a website and signed both our names. Where are Mom and Dad in this plan? I said. Where do they live? They live at home, in Pennsylvania. Maggie said this like it was obvious. This was always too much house for them anyway. Dad doesn't want to drive 6 hours every time he wants to fish. Mom hates the bugs. It's a beautiful place, but it's not practical for them. Did they tell you that? They don't have to tell me, Hannah. I'm their daughter. I know them. I'm their daughter too. Yeah. Well, you're the one who built them a 600 square foot bedroom they don't need. I looked at her. I looked at her for a long time. Brett shifted his weight from one foot to the other and tried to fill the silence by saying something about how the rental market in this part of Vermont was really hot right now, and I held up one hand and he shut up. I'm going to my car, I said. I walked down the gravel path. I opened the trunk. I took out my overnight bag, and underneath it, in a slim leather portfolio, I took out the folder. The real physical folder. I had brought it because I had brought everything. I always bring everything. That is what I do for a living, and it is what I do in my life, and I had brought every document related to this property because the closing on the propane tank service contract was tomorrow morning, and I needed to sign it in person. I walked back up the path. Brett had moved back inside. He was talking to the rental agent in a low voice. Maggie was on the porch swing, scrolling through her phone, trying to look bored. I went inside. Everyone in here, I said. Sit down. The rental agent sat down on the edge of the couch. Brett sat down in the armchair, the dark green one I had bought from an estate sale in Stowe last summer because it reminded me of the chair my dad used to read in. Maggie came in from the porch and stood in the doorway with her arms crossed. I sat down on the coffee table, which is something my mom used to yell at us for doing as kids, and I opened the folder. This property, I said, is located at 420 Birchwater Lane in the township of Gracefield, Vermont. The deed is recorded with the Gracefield town clerk and on file with the Vermont Department of Taxes. The deed lists 2 life tenants and 1 remainder beneficiary. The life tenants are Thomas Bell and Caroline Bell, my parents. The remainder beneficiary is me, Hannah Bell. Brett's face didn't move. The deed is structured as a ladybird deed, which in Vermont is recognized as an enhanced life estate. What that means, in plain English, is that my parents have the right to live in this house for the rest of their lives. They cannot sell it. They cannot rent it without my written consent. They cannot encumber it. They cannot transfer it. And on the death of the second of them, the property passes directly to me, automatically, outside of probate, with no involvement from any other heir. The rental agent was looking at her clipboard like she wished it was a door. In addition, I said, the property is held in an irrevocable trust I established 16 months ago. The trust is the legal title holder. My parents are the income beneficiaries during their lifetimes, with the right of occupancy. I am the trustee. The trust document specifies that no rental, lease, license, or other commercial use of the property may be undertaken without the written authorization of the trustee. That's me. Maggie's arms were no longer crossed. Her hands were at her sides. I have prepaid the property taxes for the next 15 years. I have a maintenance reserve account with $250,000 in it earmarked for the upkeep of this property and any future modifications my parents might want, such as a chairlift on the porch stairs or a ramp from the driveway, or whatever they need to be able to use this house for the rest of their lives. The reserve is also held in the trust. I am the sole signatory. Brett opened his mouth. I'm not done. He closed his mouth. You are not on the deed. You are not in the trust. You are not a beneficiary of anything related to this property. Neither is my sister. The only people in the world with any legal interest in this house are my parents and me. And I want to be very clear about something, because I have a feeling we're going to need clarity later. I looked directly at my brother-in-law. If you list this property as a rental on any platform, public or private, including but not limited to the assessment your friend here is conducting today, you will be committing fraud because you are advertising the rental of a property you have no legal right to rent. I will pursue that. I have a good friend, who is an assistant U.S. attorney in the District of Vermont, and she will be very interested in the wire fraud implications of an out-of-state listing on a federally trafficked platform like Airbnb or Vrbo. Are you with me so far? He didn't say anything. I'll take that as a yes. The rental agent stood up. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just going to head out. Wait one moment, please. I held out my hand and she stopped. Can I see the paperwork Mr. Penhallow signed with your company? He hasn't signed anything yet. Today was a preliminary walkthrough. What did he tell you about the ownership of this property? She glanced at Brett. Brett was studying his shoes. He said it belonged to his in-laws and that he was acting as the family representative. Did he show you a power of attorney? He said he was bringing it to closing. There is no power of attorney. He has no authority to act on behalf of my parents. I'd like your card, please. And the name of your supervisor. I'm not going to do anything with it today, but I'd like it on file. She gave me a card. Her hands were not entirely steady. I felt for her a little. She was just doing her job. I walked her to the door and thanked her for her time. I told her I was sorry she'd been brought into this. She didn't quite look at me, but she nodded, and she got back into her Lexus, and she drove away. When I came back inside, Maggie was crying. She does this. She has done it our whole lives. The moment a confrontation goes against her, the tears come out, and the rest of the room is supposed to rearrange itself around her grief. Brett was standing behind her with a hand on her shoulder. Hannah, you didn't have to humiliate us, she said. I really did, though. This wasn't even about us. We were trying to do something for the family. Maggie, stop. You always do this. You always make everything about yourself and your money and your career. You always have to be the one in charge. And now Mom and Dad are going to think we did something wrong. And it's going to ruin Christmas. And it's all because you couldn't just talk to me like a normal sister. I sat down on the couch. I was very tired. The drive had been long, and the adrenaline was starting to leave me, and my hands were shaking a little even though my voice wasn't. I looked out the sliding glass doors at the lake. The sun was lower now, and the water was starting to do the gold thing it does in early evening, where everything turns the color of weak tea. Maggie, I said, let me ask you something. When was the last time you called Mom? She blinked. Just to say hi. Not for a holiday. Not because I texted you and said you should. Just to call her. That's not fair. When was the last time you visited them? Not when they came down to you. When did you drive up to Carbondale and walk into their house and have a meal with them? She didn't answer. When was the last time you helped Dad with anything? The gutters. The basement leak from last spring. The car battery thing in February. Did you know about any of that? You're just trying to make me feel guilty. No, I'm trying to figure out where you got the idea that you were entitled to the place I built for them. Brett made a small noise like he was going to say something. I held up one finger and he stopped. You're their child, Maggie said, and I'm their child, and what's theirs is ours. That's how families work. This isn't theirs in the way you mean. They're going to leave it to both of us when they die. You're just trying to cheat me out of half of it. I built it, Maggie, with my own money. I'm not cheating anyone out of anything. I'm giving them a place to live for the rest of their lives. That's all I ever wanted to do. That was the whole entire thing. And then you keep it. And then I keep it. That's selfish. I almost laughed. I didn't. But I almost did, and I think she could see it on my face. Because something shifted in her then. Some calculation she'd been making rearranged itself, and she stopped crying in that abrupt way she has. And she straightened up and looked at me with her eyes dry and her jaw set. You're going to regret this, Hannah. Probably not. When Mom and Dad find out what you did to us today, they're going to be devastated. I'm going to tell them everything. I'm going to tell them you screamed at us and threatened us with a federal lawyer. I'm going to tell them you're cutting their oldest daughter out of their life over a building. And they're going to side with me. You know they will. You know how Dad is. I did know how Dad was. My dad is a soft man. He has spent 40 years saying yes when he wanted to say no. And he has spent 36 of those years saying yes specifically to Maggie. She was right. There was a real chance he would call me on Sunday afternoon and ask me, in his quiet voice, if I couldn't just smooth things over with my sister. If I couldn't just let it go, this once for the family. I want you to do something, Maggie. I want you to do something, Maggie. I want you to call Mom right now. What? Call her. Put it on speaker. Tell her exactly what you and Brett were doing here today. She's on the cruise. International rates. She has the international plan. I bought it for her. Call her. Maggie did not call her. Then I will. Hannah, don't. Brett, you can leave, I said. I'd like you to leave. You can wait in your car. This is between me and my sister. He looked at Maggie. Maggie nodded, which was the first thing she'd done in 20 minutes that wasn't combative. He left. I heard the screen door bang behind him and a car door, and the low hum of his engine starting. I sat down next to my sister. She had moved to the couch at some point. I don't remember her doing it. We sat there for a minute without talking. The room had gotten dim. I could hear a loon out on the lake, very faintly, the long, sad note they make at dusk. I'm not going to call Mom, I said. I just wanted you to think I might. She let out a breath. I'm not going to tell her any of this. Not today. Not while she's on the cruise. Not while Dad is enjoying the first real vacation of his life. They get back Sunday. They come up here Saturday to the cottage they don't know about yet. I'm going to give them the keys. I'm going to watch my dad walk onto that dock again, and nothing you did today is going to take that from them. Do you understand me? She nodded. But I'm going to tell them eventually, not because I want to hurt you, because they have a right to know that their son-in-law tried to monetize their retirement gift and that their oldest daughter helped him. They're going to make their own decisions about what that means for your relationship with them. That's not my business. That's between you and them. Hannah, I'm not done. The rental agent is going to file a report with her supervisor about this visit. I'm going to make sure she does, because I asked for the supervisor's name. There will be a paper trail if anything like this happens again, with this property or with any other asset that belongs to Mom and Dad. I will move very fast and I will not warn you first. Do you understand? Yes. You and Brett are going to drive home tonight. You're not staying in this house. It's a 6-hour drive. You'll get a hotel. She didn't argue. Tomorrow you're going to write me a check for the cost of the curtains, the propane fill that you used to run the AC all afternoon, and whatever else I find when I do a walkthrough tonight. I'll send you a number. Okay. And Maggie. She looked at me. He's not going to stop. You know that, right? It's not going to be the cottage. It's going to be Mom's jewelry next, or Dad's pension, or the house in Carbondale when they're too old to live there. He's going to keep finding things. And every time, you're going to help him, because you don't know how to say no to him. I'm telling you this because no one else is going to. And because I love you. And because in 20 years, when you're 61 and you're trying to figure out how everything went wrong, I want you to remember that I sat on this couch with you and I told you the truth. She didn't say anything. She got up eventually and she gathered the curtains off the floor and she put them back on the rod. Kind of the best she could without the ladder. Brett was outside in the car. I watched her walk down the gravel path. She paused at the Subaru's reflection, fixed her hair, got into the passenger seat. They left. I stood on the porch until the sound of the engine was gone. Then I walked around to the back deck and I sat down on the steps that go down to the dock and I cried for about 10 minutes. The kind of crying that doesn't have any sound to it, just water on your face. The loom was still out there. The light on the lake had gone from gold to copper to something like wine. When I was done, I went inside and I unpacked. I put fresh sheets on the bed in my parents' room, the big room with the picture window that looks out at the lake. I put coffee in the pantry. I put 2 mugs on the counter, the ones I bought at a pottery sale in Vergans that had little birds painted on them because my mom collects mugs with birds on them, and she has done so since I was 4 years old. I tied a red ribbon to the porch railing. On Saturday afternoon, I picked them up at the airport in Burlington. They were tan and tired and happy. My dad had a sunburn on the back of his neck. My mom had a tote bag full of seashells. She showed me each one in the car and told me where on the beach she had found it. We drove the 2 hours back to the lake and I made small talk and asked about the cruise and tried not to cry. And when we pulled into the driveway, my dad said, "Whose house is this, honey?" And I handed him a key on a wooden keychain shaped like a loon. And I said, "It's yours." He didn't say anything for a long time. He held the key in his hand. He looked at the porch and the gravel and the mailbox at the end of the drive, which I had hand-painted with their last name. My mom got out of the car. She walked up the path and stopped halfway and put her hand over her mouth. We went inside. I showed them every room. The kitchen with the pantry already stocked. The bedroom with the picture window. The little reading nook off the living room with the chair from the Stowe estate sale. My mom touched everything very gently, like she was afraid it would disappear. My dad walked straight through the great room and out the sliding glass doors and onto the back deck and down the steps to the dock. He stood at the end of the dock for a long time. I watched him from the deck. The water was doing the late afternoon glass thing. A heron was standing on the rocks across the cove. He came back up. He was crying, not hiding it. He hugged me. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. I told them about Maggie and Brett 3 weeks later on a Tuesday on the phone. Because by then, I had thought about how to say it in a way that wouldn't ruin their summer. I told them what the visit had been. I told them what the deed said. I told them I had handled it and that they didn't need to do anything. My mom cried. My dad got very quiet and then he said, "Thank you for telling us, Hannah." That was all he said about it for a long time. Maggie called my mom the next day and told her own version of the story. My mom listened. She didn't interrupt. When Maggie was done, my mom said, "Honey, I'd like you to think for a long time about the difference between what you did and what your sister did. And then I'd like you to call me back when you're ready to tell me the truth." Maggie didn't call back for 4 months. When she did not mention the cottage. My mom did not mention it either. They have not spoken about it since, as far as I know. Brett and Maggie are still married. They came to Christmas last year. They did not come to the lake. They have not been invited to the lake. They will not be invited to the lake. This is not a punishment. It is a boundary, and a boundary is just the place where one person ends and another person begins. And sometimes families have to learn where those places are even when it would be easier to pretend they didn't exist. My dad goes up to the cottage almost every weekend now, even in winter. He has a chair on the dock he likes in summer, and a chair by the wood stove he likes in winter, and a notebook where he writes down the names of the birds he sees. My mom comes up less often because she still works 2 days a week at a clinic. But when she's there, she bakes, and the kitchen smells like cinnamon, and she leaves notes for me on the counter when I visit, in her round nurse's handwriting, telling me what's in the fridge and where the spare key is, and that she loves me, always, and to drive safe on the way home. The deed is still in the same drawer. The trust is still intact. The reserve account still has its $250,000 in it, and I add to it every year, because someday my parents are going to need a chairlift on those porch stairs, and a ramp from the driveway, and somebody to drive them to their doctor's appointments in Burlington. And I want all of that to be already paid for before they ever have to ask. That was the whole picture. That was always the whole picture. My parents on a porch with coffee, watching the water, and nobody, not my sister, not her husband, not anybody else, was ever going to take it from them. Not while I was still here. I think about that Thursday afternoon more than I expected to. Not the confrontation itself, which I had rehearsed for in some quiet way for years, without knowing I was rehearsing. What I think about is the drive home that Sunday night, after my parents had walked through every room, after my dad had stood at the end of the dock for so long, I worried he'd forgotten to come back inside. I drove the 6 hours back to Boston in the dark, and I cried, somewhere around hour 3. The kind of crying that surprises you because you thought you were done. What I learned that week is that love without preparation is just a wish. I loved my parents. I had loved them my whole life. But love alone wouldn't have stopped Brett from listing that house on a rental site. Love alone wouldn't have protected my dad from a son-in-law who saw him as an obstacle to a revenue stream. The thing that protected them was the 16 months I spent with a trust attorney in Burlington, the spreadsheet, the folder, the boring, careful work that nobody ever celebrates because it doesn't make a good story until the day it does. I also learned something about my sister that I wish I hadn't. Maggie didn't wake up one morning and decide to take advantage of our parents. She drifted there, slowly, over years, by always choosing the easier conversation, by never saying no to her husband, by letting small wrongs accumulate until a big wrong felt like just another small one. That's how it happens, I think, for most people who end up doing terrible things to their own families. They don't plan it. They just stop paying attention to who they're becoming. And the other thing, the harder thing, I had to accept that doing the right thing for my parents meant doing a painful thing to my sister. There wasn't a clever way around it. There wasn't a version where everybody got what they wanted and nobody had to feel bad. Sometimes the loving choice and the easy choice are the same. Sometimes they aren't, and you have to pick, and you don't get to pick again later. If you have parents who built their lives on small salaries and big sacrifices, take care of them on paper, not just in your heart. Talk to a lawyer. Read the deed. Understand the difference between an asset that belongs to them and an asset that's protected for them. Watch the people who marry into your family and watch them carefully, because the law is interested in technicalities, not in feelings, and feelings won't save anyone when somebody decides to test the technicalities. I'm not bitter about Maggie. I'm sad about her. I'm sad about the version of her that taught me to ride a bike on a cul-de-sac in 1998. And I'm sad that she let a man convince her that her parents' retirement was a transaction. But I'm not going to carry her choices for her. I'm going to keep adding to that reserve account, and I'm going to keep driving up to Vermont, and I'm going to keep watching my dad watch the water. Because that was the whole picture. And the picture is still mine to keep.